"You must forgive me," Mr. Archer said, his lips peeled back in a grin. "I shouldn't be smiling, smirking." He laughed out loud, high-pitched. "But it'll take a moment. I just hadn't expected, even on my deathbed." "Of course," the man behind the desk said. He smiled encouragingly. In the tremendous room there was only Mr. Archer, the desk he stood before, and the man who sat behind it. The ceiling of the room was soaring, limitless, arched as far above Archer's head as the blue sky had been when he was alive. The walls were misty, far-away things, and in the center of it all, there he was, Edward Moran Archer. "A very unusual reaction, I assure you," the man behind the desk said, looking down at the lapels of his suit to give Archer time to straighten his face. "We make allowances for it. Your present age of sophistication is wary of anthropomorphisms such as this. People are no longer raised in the belief of a heaven and a hell. They view such things as convenient fictions for the preachers and writers. Naturally, when they die and find themselves catapulted into one or the other, the reaction is hysteria. Some cry, others laugh." "I see," Mr. Archer said. He had himself under control now, but a grin was still tugging at the corners of his broad mouth. "Well, I haven't been a particularly good chap. Broke a number of the 10 Commandments, including the more serious ones. Where's your fire and brimstone?" He pursed his lips because the grin was threatening to crack any moment. Imagine, after all, he was going to be burned in a good old-fashioned hell of the sort his grandfather had described in such loving detail. But he still couldn't take it seriously. The situation was so bizarre, so basically humorous. "Do you want fire and brimstone?" the man behind the desk asked. "Not particularly," Archer said. "Is there any choice?" "Of course," the man told him, looking very undiabolical in his neat gray business suit with his smoothly combed hair. "Free will is manifest in the universe, even here. You have many alternatives to choose among." "Different punishments?" Archer asked. "A choice of the thumbscrews or the Iron Maiden, the rack or the hot irons." "All those come under a single category," the man behind the desk said. "Allow me to show you." Instantly Archer discovered himself in a disembodied intellect. He was in a small, low-ceilinged room. The only light was provided by smoking torches which threw jagged streaks of red and yellow across the stone walls. "Most gay," Archer thought, and complimented himself on his coolness. In the center of the room was a tableau. A man, a single rag wrapped around his loins, was stretched across a great wheel, his body drawn tight as a taut bowstring, his tormentors motionless on either side of him. One held a hot iron a bare fraction of an inch from the flesh. Another was tightening an iron boot to his foot, while still another had his hand on the lever that moved the wheel, and all were frozen in mid-action. The faces of the tormentors were hooded and dark. The man's agonized face was turned to the ceiling, and all Archer could see was the white line of his jaw and corded neck. He strained his eyes to catch a movement, but for long seconds could make out none. Then he noticed that imperceptibly the rack was being drawn tighter. The boot was being screwed on the foot, the steaming iron coming closer, searing the flesh by degrees so gradual as to be imperceptible. The scene vanished. "Not laughing now?" the man behind the desk asked in a friendly tone. Archer shook his head. "We show that scene first. There's nothing like a little good old-fashioned torture to sober a man up. Of course, they say that no physical torment can compare to the psychological, and I believe it is true. Still, for those who can't stand the others, we do have the torture chambers." "You said there were other choices," Archer asked.